So today I'm sitting in the old Masters dining room at Geelong Grammar. I'm here at the PESA conference, and sitting with me is Helen Street. Helen, what do you do?
I'm at the PESA conference now, and I run the Positive Schools conferences.
Yep.
And I also am an applied social psychologist who's interested in mental health, particularly in the well-being of young people in schools.
Yeah. And so yesterday I was sitting in your talk, and it was really powerful for me to listen to you talk about the importance of context, and I think you call it the space between us and the spaces between us, and the idea that, I guess in a nutshell, you were talking about all these programs that schools are investing heavily in terms of time and money and staff training, and yet we could make a fairly compelling argument that they're not working as well as perhaps we hope or think or
Absolutely.
say we do.
In fact, some people would say that they are not really working at all, and often the methodology is really flawed when looking at impact. I wouldn't be as harsh as that. I'd say that definitely there are some programs having some impact. In particular, I think some mindfulness programs. But overall, I don't think that I've seen really any evidence of any program working as well as it was anticipated it would work, considering the research it's got behind it and how embedded it is in the science of well-being. And certainly nothing's working as well as we need it to work.
Right.
So even though you might be seeing some sort of shifts in students' well-being within the context of researching a program, overall, if we look at the mental health of young people in Australia, and this is reflected around the developed world, it's pretty appalling. We've got 1 in 4 of our adolescents and nearly 1 in 6 of our primary school age kids that are severely mentally distressed. We've got a 5% attempting suicide in adolescents. I mean, that is just unacceptable, and it's too simple to and too tempting to say, oh, we have to do more of what we're doing. We have to do more of what we're doing. I'd say actually maybe it's time to take a step back and say, you know what, is there something we're missing here? Is there something we should be doing differently? And I think, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking to yesterday.
Yeah, so the thing, I guess that's the crux of it, isn't it? So what is the thing that we're missing in your experience? So you're seeing these approaches be rolled out, but what are people missing?
They're missing the fact that we're not just individuals, we're people. And I feel that a lot of the stuff we're doing stems from positive psychology, which stems from a sort of clinical focus, which comes from one-on-one therapy, how to treat an individual with an individual issue. Whereas when it comes to trying to support well-being in large groups of people in whole schools, we're looking at social systems, we're looking at social beings, and how do we change a social system to create a context that allows people to flourish. So what we're missing is the fact that we are shaped by, we are far more than the skin that we're in. And I think very frequently, we look to, when something goes wrong with a child in a school, we say, what's wrong with them? Or what skills do they need to learn? Or how can we help them? As opposed to standing back and saying, is there something unhealthy about the context they're in? And maybe is their reaction a healthy reaction to an unhealthy context, as opposed to some sort of unhealthy reaction because there's something wrong with them. And so we need to pay more attention to social context. And in my view, we have 2 things that we're doing in our schools that are incredibly unhealthy. One, we have this obsessive outcome focus. And I know from research I've done since the 1990s that if we tie our well-being up with our outcomes, it means that we tend to put our happiness on hold during the processes of pursuing our goals, because we've decided that we're not going to be happy until we get what we need or what we want. I won't be happy until I get my grade A in English. So all the time I haven't got that, I'm judging myself to not yet be happy, which immediately makes me vulnerable to rumination and depression. Then if I don't get my grade A, I'm going to feel pretty devastated because I've made that my happiness conditional on getting it. If I do get my grade A, I'm going to be elated, but that's a very momentary emotional reaction.
Spike.
Exactly. And then I'm going to sink back down to where I was before.
Because I've got to get the next one.
And then I'm going to have to set myself a slightly higher goal.
So what about the kids for whom A's aren't even in the... I've never had an A, right? What about the kids at the other end of the spectrum who might not be making these outcomes?
Well, they often end up quite disengaged and demotivated because they're not getting a sense of competency about their progress, and often there's a ceiling put on their learning. So in schools that stream, for example, we're finding that kids that are put in lower streams are given less opportunity to expand their knowledge, and they're given less autonomy in the classroom. So they're given less opportunity as well to find a sort of creative way to learn. And that does lead to despondency in a sense that I'm not quite as good as other people. Plus, we also see that even for those kids who maintain a strong sense of their possibilities, often because they have parents who believe in them, then teachers don't perceive them to have potential any longer because it's been decided that their outcomes have dictated that they're not as capable. And in fact, when you looked at stream kids that have already been streamed, the decision made for where to put those kids is largely based on where they've already been placed. So we're sort of really pigeonholing kids very early on, and that's a problem. It's a problem all round. The only kids that can possibly benefit are those that are highly academic and are feeling like they're winners because they're being called gifted and special and being given awards and rewards. But even for those kids, they often feel under an enormous amount of pressure to continue to maintain that level of achievement. So even then, I don't think it's a winning idea. So this outcome focus, but that's just part of the picture, that with an outcome focus, we're encouraging everyone to think about extrinsic rewards and to think about other people's judgment of how they do, rather than to learn self-determination, which is so linked to well-being.
So self-determination, I mean, it's something that I've been reading a fair bit of since I came across it back in the mid 2000s, maybe early 2000s, but it's not something a lot of people actually are aware of. So you've just used that phrase, but I guess in a nutshell, could you sum up what self-determination actually is, and what are the prerequisites, the pillars of self-determination?
If you have a sense of autonomy, which translated means that you feel you have some sense of choice and control over your life, which at a slight tangent, interestingly, has also the two components that are used when children describe something as play.
Right.
So there's great research called Karen McInnes in the UK who found that when you are taking a class and you want the activity to be playful, children will say, I'm playing, if they feel they have choice and control. So autonomy and play are very linked. Yeah.
Even though they're not necessarily playing, like an adult might not look at them and see them as playing, but if
but if you think, when is it play to that child, and when is it work to that child? Choice and control is the deciding factor for the child, from the child's perspective. So when we have a sense of our own autonomy, that we're taking control of our life, that we have some ownership over our life, and when we feel that we are engaged in what we're doing and we have a connection to our life, which is everything, we're social beings, and when we have a sense of our own competency. And I think that's worth touching on, because certainly when we look at positive education that's based on the PERMA model, the A for PERMA is accomplishment or achievement, whereas in my understanding there is no research that says your achievement links to your well-being. Rather, it's your sense of progress, and most significantly your belief in
no worries.
So it's not, achievement doesn't really link to your well-being. Rather, it's your sense of progress, and most importantly, your belief in the likelihood that you will achieve. Right. So I could want to be an astronaut, and you could say it doesn't stand a chance. But if I believe that I'm making progress, I can now run to that goal. And I believe that ultimately one day I'm going to get there, and maybe I will. Maybe Mr. Branson will come along and I can be an astronaut as a tourist or something. So as long as I believe it's possible, I've got good well-being. So I don't think achievement and well-being go together, but a sense of progress and competency are vital. Okay, so
where do you draw the line between, I guess the educators or the parents? Because I can imagine this. Right, I've got 2 young kids. I can imagine, as supportive as I might want to say I am and want to be, I could imagine a time when Jackson might turn around and say something like, I want to be an astronaut, right? Or I want to be this or that. And I might even come at it with the real best intention, say, mate, not going to happen.
I can't believe you would do that.
But not in, you know what I mean, but not in that, but I do this sense of, I don't know what the word is, but
you
realistic.
might feel that you needed to instill a sense of realism.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So we do see this a lot, so maybe not for children that are young.
I'm not talking about Jackson right now, I'm saying like when he's 16, 17
or,
and he,
yeah,
you know.
Or maybe he's 18 and maybe he suddenly says, hey, you know what, I want to be a movie star.
Right.
Let's go there.
Yeah,
Probably astronaut you think is well.
He probably will be an astronaut actually, because by the time he's 18 we all will be, yeah.
But you could at least say, engineering, at least you can have a sensible career on the way. But say he wants to be a movie star or an actor, or an artist or something like that, then I think that it's tempting for a lot of parents to feel, oh my goodness, you're not going to be a movie star, you're going to be an unemployed actor, so that the odds of success are pretty low, and it's a rocky road and you'll end up, it seems really unsafe. But I firmly believe that if your child has a passion for something, we should support it. And if children grow up in an environment which encourages self-determination, with that comes intrinsic motivation. So we learn to find the intrinsic rewards in the things that we do. And because that comes from a sense of competency, we don't, if that's a natural, healthy process, we don't generally have high aspirations for things that we have no chance of heading towards. And this is from my own research, find that if kids want to in a healthy way, want to be a movie star, they probably have some leaning towards the dramatic arts or acting or the skills required. And so it's
like if they're serious about it, it's not.
There's a love of it and a passion to it, and then I say we support that. Because even if they don't end up a movie star, they might end up as doing Shakespeare or
making their own stuff. Amateur dramatic, anything.
Presenting at conferences.
Exactly.
Whatever. But there'll be a dramatic flair that will come from that, and there'll be a life satisfaction. The danger signal is if somebody seems to have no aptitude or leaning towards something, but they still want it, then I would question, why do you want that? Is it because you feel it'll make you popular? Because you'll get recognition from others? Is it because you're so centred in extrinsic rewards, which is an unhealthy context, that you feel that unless I get that outcome, I'm not going to get the approval I need?
So just to wrap up, because I know you've got to go, but we've mentioned a lot about the extrinsic rewards, and I often talk about how grades is like a compensation for work and all that. If you could wave a magic wand over schools, what would you do with the whole notion of the honour boards, the trophy cabinets, the ranking of kids? What would you do, and why would you do it, and what would you expect the reaction to be?
Okay, I can almost. All right. So, in an ideal dream world, I would still allow competitive games, be it chess or rugby or whatever, but they would be totally through choice. And if you won, you can celebrate, but there is not then a celebration of the celebration. That's enough. The winning, you've won, and that's great. I would get rid of all forced competition. There would be no forced competition.
Give me an example of what that means. What's a forced competition?
Like in a primary school, if you have to participate in sports day.
Right, okay.
That's forcing kids to participate in public, often in front of all the people they hold dearest, to see who can win on the basis of good genetics.
Right.
To me, it's no difference to lining all the kids up in the primary school and saying we're going to give the kid with the bluest eyes a trophy.
Okay, yeah.
So I would certainly get rid of that.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to academics, we have forced competition because kids are sort of put in a hierarchy according to their grades or their marks, and or the whole class is given a reward, and then kids feel pressure to keep up. And so I get rid of all award systems. I get rid of all
positive behaviours for learning, for example. Have you seen that, where they get rewards?
It's absolutely shocking, because they're not actually learning to behave well. They're learning to get rewards.
Right.
They're learning that if they do certain things, they can get a reward, but that quickly becomes dissatisfying. So actually, you might get short-term compliance. But you get long-term disengagement, and you get less empathy, and you get, because you're not intrinsically invested in your behaviour, there's no point to it unless it's rewarding.
So this almost sounds like, it's great in the school where there's no behaviour dramas, but what about these, a lot of the schools that employ positive behaviours for learning have come from schools which are intense.
It's a quick fix for compliance.
Right.
When teachers, for teachers, and often I think that teachers feel that they'll lose control of the class if they don't use these things. Whereas in reality, they're making this massive distance between themselves and the kids, because they've just created a huge power imbalance by saying I'm the judge of you, and in the end of the day, students will push against that. So although they'll get short-term compliance, they'll end up having to shout and try and control the class and get more rewards and ending up unpopular, and it'll bite them in the long run. So that's
I was in school once. I was in school. I just saw this really curious thing where year 12 students were getting little, they call them gotchas, for answering questions in a year 12 HSC class. And I was just sat there going, and when I asked, it's not going to be confrontation. I was like, what do you think? That's good. It keeps them engaged. It keeps them asking questions. It's like, wow. I found that really. I found that really strange.
And I'd say to most adults, just imagine if you were in the workplace and someone gave you a sticker because you
well
said
done. You had an idea.
Yeah. Is that how much an idea is worth?
Yeah.
So instead, what we need to do is we need to build cohesion. Cohesion is the glue that binds us to each other. That it's what creates us as people in meaningful groups. And when we have a cohesive class or a cohesive school community, we internalise the values of that community. So if you don't build cohesion in your class, if you just let it happen ad hoc on its own, you'll end up with groups. We know of about 5 to 7 kids on average, and those groups might be formed on the basis of any particular membership criteria. Right. So you could have one group that are of girls that are all joined together by how good looking they think they are, or their weight, or something like that. You could have a group of boys that are all joined together by being A-grade students. You could have a group of kids that are all joined together by how much alcohol they can consume. So you're not necessarily going to have anything to do with learning or engagement as a criteria for membership. You're going to have conflicting groups. You're going to have unhealthy group membership, and you're going to have people ostracised from groups easily. You're going to have a sort of, if you feel exhausted, I'd say at the end of your day teaching, you have not got a cohesive class. So I would say to any teacher, spend the whole of the first week of the year building cohesion. Don't care how much you have to fit in with your curriculum. It'll pay dividends in the end. Spend time at the beginning of every week. Spend the first 5 minutes of every lesson. Never go more than 20 minutes without a brain break, which builds cohesion. If you have kids that are misbehaving or being your nightmare kids, they feel like they are outliers from the system because they haven't internalised the behaviours you want them to have. So they need to be brought closer. That's a sign you need to do more cohesion work, not punish them or put them out the door.
And the reaction you get when you suggest these kinds of things, or hypothetically might you get?
Well, interestingly, it's always pretty extreme.
Right. So it's either end of the spectrum, you mean?
Very much so.
Right.
So you'll get people that say, "Thank God someone is saying that." There's a few schools, often Montessori, that will say, "Hey, we did that already."
Yeah.
And then there are the people that go, "You have no idea how bad the behaviour is in my class." Or students love rewards. Why wouldn't I use?
They love competition. I get that a lot. Kids love competition.
They love it.
The kids who win love it.
But they never learn how to fail.
Yeah.
It's always the same winners, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and then other people will say, "But that's not the real world."
So. And
but
so
you know what?
Go on.
But I had, we shared a glass of wine last night. I don't think my kids should be sharing a glass of wine because that's what's going to happen when they're adults.
Thank you very much for your time. There's so much.
It felt like it was all over the place.
It was a bit all over the place, but that's how my
mind. There's sound bites.
Yeah, there's things in there. If people want to hear more or read more of your research and things like that, what would the best place or the best thing to do?
To specifically find out more about this idea of supporting a better school context, go to contextualwellbeing.com.au. Which is a fairly new website, which I put up to allow me to sort of bring a lot of this stuff together under one umbrella. So that's a nice, easy reading starting point.
Great, excellent. I'll put a link underneath the video.
Oh, okay, great.
All right, cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.